Hello everyone, my name is Shambhavi. Hope you all are doing well. So today we'll be understanding about some important characteristics of probability experiments. Okay, we'll be understanding about some important characteristics of the probability events, right? So let's get started out here. Let me just quickly change up a color here, and then for sure we can proceed up at this particular place, right? Okay, I'll be start writing up here and we'll be seeing further what are the important characteristics of the probability experiments. Actually, there are some law that you have to understand. Okay, fine. So the important characteristic ISTIC. Okay, yeah, the important characteristic of probability of BILITY. Okay. So the important characteristic of probability experiments is known as the law of large numbers. As a law of large numbers. Now, this respective law of large numbers, what it is about, that I'll be talking about right here. But you have to understand this particular thing, that there are some important characteristics of probability experiments, okay? And that are known as the law of the large numbers. This is a term which we use up here, the law of the large numbers, okay? Now, further I'll be taking up that what are these respective law of large numbers, okay? Now let's start up here that as the number of repetitions, repetitions, okay. So as the number of repetitions of an experiment is increased, is, let me just get down. Law of large numbers says that as the number of repetitions of an experiment is increased, I'm just simply writing like that, okay? So as the number of repetitions of an experiment is increased, the relative frequency, so here comes my frequency. So the relative frequency obtained in the experiment tends to become closer and closer, comes to become closer, closer, and tends to become closer and closer to the theoretical probability. Okay, probability. So the law of large numbers says that as the number of repetitions of an experiment is increased, like as we see of an increase in the number of repetitions of an experiment, the relative frequency which you have actually obtained in the experiment, that becomes closer and closer to the theoretical probability. The relative frequency which is obtained in the experiment, that slowly and slowly comes closer to the theoretical probability which you have, okay? Even though, now there is something more as well, not only this is the law, but there are some more things in this. So even though the outcomes do not happen according to any set pattern or order, Overall, overall, the long term observed, overall, long term, the long term observed, the long term observed relative frequency, the long term observed relative frequency, which we did right above, we just got that out. So the long term observed relative frequency that yes, so the long term observed relative frequency will approach will approach the theoretical probability, the theoretical probability, and I'm just simply writing up the short form for the probability like this. Okay, the theoretical probability. Fine. So this is the law of large numbers, which we do actually have a bit. Let me just hold on the cursor onto my hand, then I could just move forward. This is the law of large numbers. Okay, what does it say? It says that as the number of repetitions of an experiment increases, the relative frequency which is obtained, okay, the relative frequency which is obtained in the experiment, that tends to become closer and closer to the theoretical probability. Okay, now even though the outcomes do not happen according to any set pattern or order, okay, even though the outcomes do not happen according to any set of pattern or order, overall the long term observed relative frequency will approach the theoretical probability. So law of large numbers says that whatever the relative frequency of an experiment is there, that tends to become slowly closer to the theoretical probability. It doesn't matter that according to any set or pattern or anything like that, but yeah, the relative frequency will approach closer and closer to the theoretical probability. This is what the law of large numbers actually say here, and that's one of the very important characteristic of a probability experiment, that is to be known, and not only known but that is as well to be kept up into the mind. Okay, now okay, when do we use up a word that is empirical? Okay, the word empirical is often used instead of the word observed. So at some time if I used about observed, or at if some point if I use about empirical, so do not get confused in that. Observed and empirical are the somewhat are the same things only. Okay, if I write empirical or if I write observed, the meaning would be the absolutely same only, because it could happen that sometimes if I go in the more technical terms, so if I sometimes I could write up empirical, right here I didn't have to use, I simply used up the long term observed relative, but instead of that I could simply use up long term empirical relative frequency. Okay, so empirical is only used instead of observed only. Okay, do not get just confused out onto that particular things which I mentioned up here. Right. So the relative frequency which you have up into your experiment, that will approach closer and closer slowly to the theoretical probability, and that is observed actually. Okay, the long term observed means the long term empirical relative frequency will slowly and gradually approach to the theoretical probability. This is what is the law of the large numbers. This is what actually it says, right? Great. So yeah, hope I'm pretty much clear with this particular thing to you regarding the law of large numbers. That what do you have up here, and what is this law of large numbers actually mentioned up here, right? Hope I am pretty much clear with this particular thing to you. Okay. Now further we'll be having different types of events. We have the OR event, we have the AND event. We'll be moving and looking about those events into the further videos. So this is all for this video. Till then, thank you and take care.